wasn't until I saw your text yesterday, and it was probably 2 hours afterward, that I knew there had been a school shooting here. We were here in the studio working, and it's almost like Vegas in here. There are no clocks. We had done the sports show, and I looked down, and I saw your text, and it was like, whatever you said, OMG, and I didn't see all the ones before that, but I had no idea.
Well, yeah, I knew you were recording, so that's why I sent it to you. Just because I was like, I don't know what needs to happen or how, just getting information.
Oddly, I don't look at my phone then for the most part.
I
So
know.
one time in my life, I look at my phone.
I know. So it was wild. And I mean, I had some messages, and then I had a message from my daughter where she knew before I did. And I realized I had the text. Like she's in high school, and her school is a very common feeder school from that lower level. So a lot of her classmates had little siblings there.
At the school, the Covenant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so she said it was just, she was like, yeah, there was a lot of people. And just to be, in unknown of what's happening, and depending on, where the shooter was, like they just didn't, extra police were showing up to her school like immediately because they just didn't know the situation.
So someone called at 10:13, and by 10:27 it was over. So, shout out to the police officers who hopped in quickly and made a tragic situation end before it could have gotten more tragic, obviously. What was crazy was my wife had texted me too, and she was like, there's some cops, because she was right over near there. Some cops just like blocked the road. I mean, she was right there when it happened at that time, but they thought it was a funeral, like a procession coming through. And so she had to figure out how to get back home, and it wasn't until she got home, she was like, oh my God. And so we have a lot of friends who have kids, not in that specific school, but in that area, because there are a lot of schools in that area, and it's near-ish where we live. And so we're calling all of them, just going, hey, what's up? And a lot of those schools, if not all, they locked down, almost immediately. And some of the parents couldn't get into the school because they're not letting all the parents just run in there and get their kids. It's just a pretty wild day, really sad day, and when it hits close to you, it feels a lot more real than it does when it's just on the news. But that's, a bit of what's crazy at this point is that I was reading today, it's the 129th mass shooting this year. Gosh. We're only 86 days into the year. And a mass shooting is where 4 or more victims are killed by a gun. Not just one, not just somebody getting mad and shooting somebody. But think about that. And I come on and do this song and dance here, and that's almost what it feels like. That's why it's so sad, because I come on and talk about this 4 or 5 times a year. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I'm so fed up. And first, I just must acknowledge that you have parents and you have kids that don't have their parents today. Mm-hmm. So as much as this is a news story where we're going, this is tragic, we can't believe it, that the homes where the people are gone today, that ain't a news story. That ain't an internet click. That ain't a piece of paper sitting in front of me that has a bunch of notes on it that I wrote this morning so I wouldn't mess it up. That's a real life. That's a real life. There are young kids who were, and I'm going to try not to get emotional here because I just don't want to be. I think it takes away from it. But there are young kids who were killed yesterday. Young kids. Substitute teacher, custodian, head of the school, adults. There were 3 9-year-olds and 3 staff members that were killed. So I don't want to talk about anything else without first saying that makes everybody really sad, regardless of how you feel about the different elements that caused this, haven't caused this. That's just real sad. That a safe place wasn't so safe. That the safest place wasn't so safe. Your home, church, and school, that should pretty much be where you go, and you just go, it's safe here. You don't even think about it. You shouldn't even think about it. So I first want to say that it sucks and it's sad, and there are just homes that aren't a home today because how can you be a home when you're so broken inside of it because your mom or your grandma or your kids just died?
And your friends, like there's so many, like those, they all had friends, and they're at 9 years old, you're having to process something like that. And when I was picking up my daughter from school yesterday, I was sitting in the line thinking, okay, yeah, I'm sitting here picking her up from school today. There's families that dropped their kids off this morning, and it never, I'm assuming, once dawned on them
It shouldn't.
that they wouldn't be picking them up just, several hours later. Like, that's just what you do. You drop them off, and then you go, you get to pick them up. And then that's just that in an instant, their whole world is completely different and changed. And then
It always will be.
As a lot of parents out there, then, word spread quickly. There was no way to not have kids know about this. And my son has a lot of fear, and he instantly was coming home from school asking if we can make our home bulletproof. And, that's just a whole nother conversation of like, hey, you're safe here. And I love to be able to say you're safe at school too. But then it's like we have another reminder that, yes, actually, it's just hard conversations that are now being had again.
I'll say it one more time here. There have not even been 90 days this year, and there have been 129 mass shootings, 4 people or more. We're the only country this happens to, guys. You understand that, right?
Yeah.
It's just us. It's literally just us.
And what's sad is you read that number, and I'm like, I can't think of 5 of those or 4 of those because that didn't happen right down the street.
Right. And I think it's a reminder to everybody, even wherever your local is, when it happens where you live, it almost takes that to happen for you to go, wow, this is a real thing, which is also sad. It used to be 10 years ago, and I've been doing this long enough now to where if one happened, we shut it down.
Yeah.
We shut it down, and that's what we talked about all day long. There are probably, 20 or 30 we never even see in the news because they're not in the news, because if we're not locally, because so many happen. So first, I would like to acknowledge that it's the worst, most sad thing that can happen. I'd also like to acknowledge that it feels super close to us because it literally was super close to us, but it's everywhere in the country, it's super close to somebody.
Yeah.
And this that we're feeling today, somebody else is going to feel it tomorrow in a different part of the country, where we're the only country this happens to. That, to me, is so bizarre. We're the only country. We can't even protect our kids. I don't like politicians. Don't trust politicians, period. I don't like them. They don't care about you. If part of your character and your personality is that you are bonded to a politician and everybody knows you for it, they would not let you at their house. They would not have dinner with you. They need your vote, but they do not care about you. There's also something called nuance that is not used because it doesn't get clicks. You're not allowed to have nuance in any situation whatsoever in American politics or governing. Now, nuance, for those that don't know, is meaning it doesn't have to be so black. It doesn't have to be so white. It doesn't have to be so north. It doesn't have to be so south. We have none, so nothing ever gets accomplished. I will say this part again. I'm a gun owner. I've been a gun owner my whole life. Some people don't understand that guns are tools. How I grew up, we had guns as tools because we needed to eat, or we hunted, or we needed to protect ourselves. To me, except for the movies, firearms weren't a weapon. That's what was crazy about growing up in rural Arkansas. And I think there's a lot of people that don't understand what it's like growing up in rural America. And so they go, guns bad. You know what? Guns aren't bad by themselves. I can agree with that. I have them. But I'm going to give you a little bit of nuance here. Just because they're not bad by themselves doesn't mean everybody should get one. I know at least 2 of these guns were bought legally, right? So it's not somebody getting a gun and, well, you can't stop a bad guy if they're going to do bad guy things. These guns were bought legally. Now, here's my issue. Here's my problem, my real problem. The change that at some point, if I ever hop into this, that I'm going to make, or at least try to make, or at least not be elected because I'm going to say this is the change I'm going to make. We can't say everybody gets a gun, but nobody gets health care. You can't do that. You can't go, well, it's a health care issue. I hear you. It is. It's a health care issue. It's a gun issue. It can be both. But you can't go, everybody gets a gun, no license, and we're also not going to give you free health care. Because you know what? That costs money. And as somebody who couldn't afford health care as a kid, I can now. I'm good now. I got more money than I ever thought I'd have in my whole life. I'm good now. And I also have a platform that I can speak for the people that don't get spoken for a lot. So if you're going to say it's a mental health issue, I felt that, you are right. If you're going to say it's a gun issue, I felt that, you are right. It can be both. But you can't go, everybody can have a gun, but nobody gets health care. Because the same politicians that are like, well, this is a mental health issue, are not helping people get health care. And when these issues are even separate, I will come on and say, I cannot believe, here we are in the greatest country. The greatest country that gives you a shot where you are not assigned to a class. You're in one, but you can kick a door down and go up or down. The greatest country where our bravest go and fight for us. That we get to actually speak out against the government. That's what our government's about. To speak out against it. How cool is that? What country would do that? Ours, because it's awesome. That doesn't mean all of it's awesome. And if you're going to have the stance of, well, it's a mental health issue, you're right. I'm right behind you. But what are you going to do about it? You don't do anything about it. Literally, you don't do anything about it except fight it. Well, we don't want to give free health care to folks. Some folks need free health care. And if you don't give people health care, and you don't help folks with mental illness, sometimes stuff like this happens. This is not all of it, but it's a big part of it. So that's my first issue. It's not going to change from me saying this. I just want to shut down and go to commercial right now because I know this is all wasted breath. But if I don't come on and do this, I hate myself. So that's one. Two, if another person says, well, why make a law? Bad guys are just going to do it anyway. Well, then why make any law? Why put a speed limit out there?
Yeah.
Why say you can only go 65 because speeders are going to speed anyway? You know what? You're right. Some speeders do. But you know who sees the speed limit sign and goes, ooh, well, I was thinking about going fast, but maybe I won't. Most everybody. Most everybody. And I swear to God, the fact that we do not use nuance and the fact that it's just money. Your politicians are just getting money from groups. And it doesn't have to be the situation when it comes to this, by the way. It can be pharmaceuticals. It can be gun. We can walk down that list. But if you think for a second your politician cares about you at all, you're wrong. They're garbage because they continue to let this happen. They continue to let 3 9-year-olds and 3 adults be murdered in the safest place that should be on the grounds of our country, and that's a school. So I'm about to conclude this because nobody's mind is going to change from this, but at least I've said how I feel, and I don't feel like a hypocrite when I'm doing the rest of the show. I did some research. I also don't think, and I've known this, but I just wanted to make sure I was right. Let me get a drink of water here because I knew I was going to get some sort of emotion. It's just anger now. It's just anger. I did some research on the Second Amendment, and I believe in the Second Amendment because I'm a person that has guns, and I grew up in a rural community where guns were a big part. Nobody ever got shot. Take that back. We had people that blew their toes off when the gun would fall. But nobody, Guns were everywhere. But we had most people. Listen, I've had gun training. I've had firearm training. I've had background check. And I think that's all good. I should have that. I don't think anybody shouldn't. The fact that there's no carry permit, you don't have to have any permit at all to carry a gun. You do to get a car. You do to drive a car, but not to carry a gun. I'm a gun owner. I used to say proud gun owner. I'm not a proud gun owner. I'm not a proud car driver. I'm just a gun owner and a car driver because that's normal parts of my life. I don't need to create my identity because of guns. The representative that represents that district where the kids were murdered, where the 3 9-year-olds were murdered and the 3 adults, like their Christmas pictures, them holding big guns, like look what we can do. You can do it, but you're bragging about it and making it part of your identity. Why make that part of your identity? That would be like me getting on Instagram, I don't know, with a whole bunch of money. Look, I'm rich now. I don't need to do that. I don't need to prove anything. The same district. That family's all, and these poor kids, they've been indoctrinated by their parents. That's who you guys voted for. Probably a good dude. I'm going to use some nuance here. Probably a good dude, pressured, been told this is hilarious, what we should do. So I went into, the Second Amendment, which I am a fan of. And I'm so thankful that it exists. Our country's great because of many reasons. One is that. So what's really cool about technology is it allows you to go back and look at things from hundreds of years ago that even 50 years ago we couldn't do. 2008, there was a case, District of Columbia versus Heller. The Supreme Court completely divided on it. So divided because the words that were used in the Second Amendment really aren't definable by terms now, which, by the way, they also didn't have automatic, semi-automatic. They had basically muskets back then. And I think rules can change if situations get different. We amend things constantly. And I'm not saying amend the Second Amendment. I'm a fan of it. But bear arms by itself, the wording used in the Second Amendment, what that meant was each state had a militia, and that militia had the right to bear arms against the government in case the government would decide to come and invade. I'm going to hold on. I'm not going to break, Ray. So what they did is they went back and they looked at millions and millions and millions of other documents to go, what does bear arms mean? And roughly 90% of the data set, after they looked at all of this, the phrase bear arms was militia related. It wasn't everybody got a gun. So there's this confusion on the Second Amendment anyway, what it even means. Bear arms was used to refer to collective military activity, not individual use. And so the Supreme Court, even as late as 2008, were completely divided on it. They were like, well, we don't even know what they're saying here. The Supreme Court, lawyers, judges. So you got to stop using things you know nothing about as your argument. Here's what your argument should be. We got to make sure kids in schools aren't killed. That's it. How do we do that? You're probably going to be wrong 8 times. I'm going to be wrong 12 times if I try to figure it out. But we ain't doing anything. That's the problem. Nothing is changing. Why do you want things to change if nothing changes? All right. They're going to make me... This commercial is going to fire off and it's going to be a disaster. So I'm done. It's a mental health issue. It's a gun issue. But hey, how about providing some free mental health? If you're going to have some everybody gets a gun. That's all I'm saying. All right. Bye-bye.
It's a Bobby Bones Show.